everyone. Welcome to my podcast. This is Annanesterova, and my guest today is Vahid Shababi, the strategy and marketing guru in spaces like telehealth, entertainment, clean energy, SaaS, gaming, and many more. And hopefully he'll tell us more about his story and his experiences. But he's also the Chief Growth Officer at Victory Square Technologies. It's a company based out of Vancouver, Canada. And he was on a list of 40 under 40 in Canada in 2020. And I'm extremely excited to have him with me here on my podcast today. And he will share his story with my audience and with me. And thank you so much for supporting my podcast and supporting this cause and supporting what I'm trying to do here and accomplish here. Thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it, Anna, for having me. It's a pleasure being here, and I look forward to speaking with you today.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'll start with a little story how we met. I think that's something that I would like to share with my audience. I start usually my conversations with my guests with a story how I met them, because I think it's crucial to tell people that what I do, like I travel for work, I travel for pleasure, and I have incredible, just people that I meet during my travel. The quality of people is just incredible. And I cherish each and one of those people. And I thought when I was thinking about the podcast, how great it would be to bring those people and share their stories, not just with me, but with everyone, because those people inspire me every day. They make me, they make my energy to rise and do stuff and go for better, more. And I think you were one of those people. And when we met, I was actually on a short trip to Vancouver for business. It was a very short trip, a couple of days. I was working on a potential project there. And I remember someone introduced us to each other, and we had a very short conversation, maybe 30 minutes, right? Do you think is that correct? Something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think very briefly, even though we spoke for 30 minutes, I think we both realized that we are like-minded people. And I think at the end of the conversation, something that I really remember, you gave me 2 books, which was very unexpected. I have those books actually with me here. Yeah. So I'll show them. So for people who are not watching the video but listening to the podcast, I'll obviously share the title of books. So the first one was The Relentless by Tim Grover. Yeah. I read it. I remember I read it on my way back to Calgary on a plane. It's an amazing book. And the second was The Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. And I read it this year. Loved the book. And I remember that was, the great impression that you basically had on me. And I thought oh my God, this is amazing. So that's the story how I met you. But now I'd like to talk to you about things that I care about. And we spoke probably in multiple conversations we had, because I think it's important to stay in touch with people, like-minded people to share similar values, energy. And my first question to you would be, how do you spot people that like you, like-minded people? And can you maybe give an advice to people how to stay connected with those people? Because I think we live in a busy world. People don't care anymore. They just kind of go from a person to person and meet so many people. But how do you really spot those people and stay connected?
No, I appreciate it. First of all, it's a pleasure to be in touch with you. And, I appreciate your intelligence and, how driven you are. For me, it's about people around me. I always think there is something that we all can learn in any conversation that we get into it. It can be from the person that you get your coffee in the morning and there's always in a good mood, all the way to, the people that you meet through work, through networking events, through family events. Doesn't really matter what it is. You have to give it a chance and try to see people from their good side. We all have flaws. We all have weaknesses and strengths. We all have differences. And a lot of those weaknesses that we see in each other is very subjective. There is something that, hey, I may see it as a value, you may not see it as a value, something that I may be good at it or you're not be good at it. But those are subjectives. We all can look at this differently. But at the same time, I feel like everyone that we hang out with, everyone that we run into on the day-to-day basis, there is something about them that can motivate you, that they can, make you a better person in life and in your career. Now, usually those books that I gave you, it's my first recommendation for the people with, your personality or my personality, that they're driven, they're very goal-oriented, and, they want to push for something higher, right? Those two books really resonated with me when I read them. I wish that I read The Relentless way earlier when I was younger and I was just, in my sports career as well. But those two really, push me to the edges in a way that make me a better person. Shoe Dog, I think anyone who wants to run a business, anyone who's going through building a business, it's a great story because we see a lot of similar books that they try to make the person as a hero at the end of it. But this book is so real that you go through the entire roller coaster of the business. You go up, you go down. You don't know what's the next chapter. But that's the beauty of the entrepreneurship. I had this conversation with a bunch of students a few months back. I was like, entrepreneurship is not, what you think. It's lonely, it's dark, it's hard. It takes a lot of time to pay off. And it may not even pay off, right? If you're not ready for that right, it's not the right thing for you. And that book is the perfect summary of, what that is and what you're going to go through it. So to answer your question is like, I think we have to give it a chance to people and you'll be surprised. Now, when you start those conversations and you start, opening your heart and your ear to learn more about people, it's so interesting that how the people that they are, have the same value, the people that they have the similar mind in different aspect of your life. It can be personal, it can be work, it can be, in many different areas, family. You're going to start getting closer and closer and closer. And you start having the meaningful conversations in the area that you guys think alike. Right. So for me, it's again, like I'm usually the person that I always start the conversation with people around me with no expectation. I think having expectation in life is wrong. If you have no expectation, you'll be surprised in a good way. And, there are always things that can make you better and it can help the other party to be better with no expectation, just, unfiltered conversations and be yourself. So again, I don't know if I answer your questions, but it's mostly about like how you can see people, from the right angle and, always, thinking about people and counting on people on their positive sides, because we all have positive and negative, and a lot of that are subjectives. So we can remember people from their positive side and how they affected your life or my life or other people's life in a very positive manner.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And you did answer my question. But I also think many people say, oh, Anna, because it's easy for you. It's easy to say because you were, extroverted person. But I also think you can learn things like that. You can learn to be open to start conversation. And the more you do, the more you open up, like you said. And hopefully we can actually chat more about it through your life experiences, because you are also a very extroverted person. You like meeting people. But I believe that you can learn the skill. I believe that you can change your life. You can change the way you think. You can change the way you approach other people and meet other people. So I think it's something that you can learn as a person. It's not just you born with it because you're extroverted or more social, and some people are less social, because I understand not everyone is the same, right?
I 100% agree with you. I think there is nothing in life that is absolute. Nothing is, you're either good at it or you can be good at it. It's being social or not social. I'll give you an example. Growing up, I always had a fear of height, and I never shared with people. And that's kind of like goes back to my personality. I usually do not share when I'm going through a tough time, or I'm, have a fear of something, or I'm, have a stress, because I constantly fight with myself to make sure to defeat that feeling. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but that's part of my personality. And usually I share after things are over. Growing up when I was a kid, I had a fear of height. And I pushed myself to the limit and so much put myself in the situation that right now I love height. And again, I know that's one of the things that I love the most is flying. So the reason I'm sharing that is we all have, areas that we're good at it, we're not as good at it, or area that we want to be good at it. Because at the end of the day, not necessarily everything that other people do, you want to do. If you should do it only if you enjoy it. You should do it like, hey, if you don't like to be social and you're enjoying, being, in your own bubble and with a very limited number of the people, so be it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful. It's, again, you have to be able to enjoy your life from no matter what you do. But if you really want to be social, if you really want to be, go out, be outgoing, by putting yourself in that position and honoring the fact there are areas that you can improve and keep focusing on that. And what I always think is in my life is I look at people with the eye that how can I be better in the areas that they're better than me? And it can be something simple, like how they're social, they take care of people, how they're better in the business, how they're smarter at making decisions. Even if you walk out and say, hey, I love the fashion the guy, or the girl they're wearing. Like, again, you can learn from that. If you go, get your coffee in the morning and there's a teenager at 5 a.m. that is smiling and working, you don't know how to be positive that day. There is something that you can learn from that person. Doesn't matter its age or seniority or level in life. So again, going back to what you just mentioned is like, first you have to see what makes you happy. Not necessarily everything that works for other people may work for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel everyone has to respect their own space the way that makes you happy. But if there are areas that you think you're going to be a happier person, if you work on those areas, you should be open. And again, the first start with, by accepting the fact that, hey, I can be better. Hey, I might, again, I may do something better than what I used to before, and be open to learn from everyone around you. We all interact with, tens or, hundreds of people per week, depending on what we do or how social we are. And, there are always something about those people that you can learn from them and work on it ourselves. Again, going back, I think, I know we're going to talk about this, later in this podcast around the professional life as well. But I feel people sometimes they look at things and hurdles as excuses. And instead of working on the areas that they have full control over, they try to find things that they don't have a control and they make those as excuses. Mm-hmm. Anything good in life comes with the price. And that price sometimes is a hard work, is time, is effort, is stress, whatever that is, you have to pay that price. So, again, focusing on the areas that is in your full control, not worry about the things that is not in your control, and not seeing it as, hey, 0 and 1. It's something that you can work on. It's something that, hey, don't use it as an excuse to those are the prices that you have to pay.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Well, I think that's a great way to start the story of Wahid and how you actually came to the point where you are now on list of 40 under 40 in Canada. But I think it's important to mention that it obviously didn't come just one day you wake up and you get on that list. You obviously work so hard and you have to go through so many different changes personally, professionally, and go through so many adversities in order to achieve that. And I want to emphasize it's also in your story, you also came from a different country to Canada. That's another layer of complexity. And we discussed it before privately, just between two of us. And it's something we share because we came from a very different country, different culture. And when you start over in a different country, you really have to adjust. You really need to find your place. And I think many people who are listening to this podcast, and if they are moving or going to a different country for work, for immigration, doesn't matter. I think it would be very valuable for them to hear that. And I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about your story. Where did you start? Where did you grow up, and how you end up in Canada, and how this amazing progress happened in your lifetime from where you were, what you do now?
First of all, I appreciate your kind words. I think obviously, like, there are many steps ahead of me, and that I can continue working on myself and going up. And there have been so many people in my life, in my personal life and business life, that played a big part in all the success that I witnessed or I went through it. So I grew up in Iran. Moved to Canada when I was 17 with family. Started in grade 12. No idea how to speak English. I went through school. Then year end, I had to go to a Canadian college because I didn't have English 12 at that year. Now, back then I was playing basketball in a semi-professional level. Back home, I played in the highest level. I played national team, and I continue playing in the national team. Then when I moved to Canada, obviously that was my, only thing that, drove me. I know my parents wanted me to study well, but I always went to school to play basketball. Then I went to Langara College. I played for Langara, and I became, I was the only member of the team that I was selected for the BC All-Star team. Then through that, I went to Simon Fraser University. I studied engineering, and I played for SFU. And again, I've always had the mentality that what's next, right? It may sound funny, but I've never, ever had plan B in my life. Plan A always had to work. And I'm usually harder on myself than anyone else, that plan A has to work. Now, if I want to go from point A to point B, there is no plan B, but there is a plan B how I get there. And I always push myself to get there. And I don't like to, leave things unfinished. And maybe that's the only reason I finished, my degree, because I knew I'm not good at it. I knew I'm not as smart as other people in the class that they go through that, but I couldn't have something that is not undone. It's kind of like a personal challenge that I had to do it. Then I've always had side hustles, from, buying to selling cars, being a club promoter for years, back when I was going to school, and had always side hustles that how to make money. My first business was started when I was 22, I guess. I was in, graphic design marketing specifically for dentists. Then one thing led to the other, and, going through the few different businesses, I had exits in my life, and got where I am today. And again, the biggest thing for me in life was a few things. One, as I grew up and, tried to be wiser, even though I still think, there's a lot of work on that department, is focusing on what matters. Sometimes, when we're young, we think, hey, I want to focus on something that brings good wealth and, focus on the money side of it, which I think money will follow you if you're good at what you do. And again, getting to the point that doesn't matter what you do, always be the best, or be, one of the best of what you're doing. You can be a, stylist, you can be a dancer, you can be a teacher, you can be, a VC, you can be, a salesperson. Doesn't matter what it is. Just focus on how you can be the best one and how you can, compete. Again, I have to say, again, going back to our earlier conversation, not necessarily being competitive is a great thing. It depends if you enjoy it or not. But I personally, I have that competitiveness. And I'm a sore loser. No matter what I do, I'm a sore loser. I have I want to win. So
I have a quick question here. Is it competitiveness with yourself more than anything else?
First, it's not with myself, but again, maybe that's one of the things that sports taught me. If it gets to the point, I take things personal. If I have to win, it's usually the worst thing is if I feel somebody's, challenging me on something. And, but again, it's for greater. You have to figure out what is your mission, what is your vision in life, what is your purpose, and everything has to be aligned with that. Doesn't matter what you do, your relationships, your friendships, your any move that you make in the business. If you don't have a purpose in life, I feel it's a dead end. But if you have a purpose in life, there are mornings that you wake up, and I'm sure you've gone through it. That you wake up and you're like, why am I doing this? It's so much stress. Things are going, sideways. But if you have that purpose that reminds you who you are and why you do this, that's what you're going to put you back on track and move things forward. So that's kind of my story that, again, in the professional life, how I came to Canada and focused on what matters. And again, I have to also, you mentioned it's not always the success. There are so many failures that you have in life. There's so many, failed projects or moments that I had in life that helped me to be focused for the next thing. And again, I always say, hey, you can lose a battle, but win the war at the end of it, right? And we always, talk about like, hey, how Steve Jobs started from, his garage, or this person started from that. We all have the first chapter. Like everyone that is listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you have the first chapter that we had at some point in life, some hard moments or miserable moments that, hey, that's where I started from, or that's what I've gone through. But what makes them is the last chapter. So if we focus on the last chapter, that's what it counts. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure everyone in this world have gone through difficulties one way or the other. It's family, it's immigration, it's work, it's bankruptcy, it's health. Whatever about that is, we all go through it. That's what life is, right? That what makes us to be appreciative of the high moments and up moments that we have. That's the last chapter that is going to make us to be counted and be a role model, or be something, inspiring in front of other people that is following your path.
No, I totally agree. I think it's very important to have that purpose in life, and also knowing who you are, because sometimes through immigration, for example, you also can lose that part of you for some time, right? Because it's a tough one, because it's coming from my own experience. It takes some time for you to go back to who you are and understand, because you're being put in a very different situation, different environment, and you need to find yourself again. And maybe that's another first chapter potentially, because you've had your life before, but then you have the life, I wouldn't say after, but kind of in immigration, so in a different country. And you have to find who you are. You have to find that place, and especially that young age too, 17, 18. For me, it was 21, 22. Similarly, because you're already an adult person in a way, so you need to find that strength and find a way to get back to who you are, and find that purpose again. So I think that's very valuable.
Again, that goes back to what I said earlier. These are the prices that some people use as excuse to not get out of it and move forward, right? I'm sure you have in your network, and I have in my network, that the people have gone through this immigration, and they are people that gave up, and they're using that as an excuse. And always when you talk about it, they're like, hey, but you don't understand, moving at age of X or Y, or just going through this is not easy. But on the other hand, there are people that you look at it like, holy, like I wish I had such drive that it took me a year or 2 years or 3 years or 10 years, but that person is doing it in 6 months or 2 months. And how, so those are the prices that you're saying. And I think immigration for sure is one of them, but there are other obstacles in life that it's going to be a great reflection of how you can deal with some of these, hurdles in life, and make you to have a better understanding of your strengths and weaknesses for the next one. Because for sure, it's not going to be the last one. I don't think there is any, as long as you want to push yourself out of your comfort zone and keep going up, there's always something that is coming, right? And you have to be ready for it, and you have to have a good self-awareness in a way that, what are the areas that I need to work on, and move yourself further and further on that path.
Yeah. Well, I guess one last thing about the immigration, the part of the moving countries, is like you mentioned earlier that you do not share your fears usually with people or challenges. You just have that personality. I actually share the same personality. I usually tend to process things internally, and then you just expose the end result to the world. But I'm learning and going through process of trying to get it out a little bit more often. But I'm curious to know, do you think that partially is related to moving from one culture to another, where you find that maybe your fears or your challenges would not be understood, or it's just a personality? So how do you think that came along? It was just your personality from the very beginning, or moving cultures and countries kind of contributed to it a little bit?
I think, again, I'm not an expert in that area, but I think it's a combination of the few things. I think the personalities that each of us are having today is an outcome of the situation that we've gone through it. That can be, part of it will be the culture, that can be family, that can be parents, that can be earlier experiences with people around you, that, it results in who you are and what you do. And that's something that I think for people in my age, it's harder for you to make those changes. Like, I'm not saying that you can't and use that as an excuse, but I think a change that it may take me 2 years or 3 years or 5 years to make from my personalities that, again, I know they're not good, but hey, it is what it is right now. I have to keep working on myself. If you look at a younger version of me, that might be, easier to do. Now, I'm looking at that constantly as a dad. Like, my son, when I see, how he treats me, I always think, okay, that's a reflection of how I treat him. Now, I've been looking at it and say, hey, is it something that he's misbehaving or he's not doing these things properly? But at the end of the day, if there is anything as a parent that I feel, hey, he's not doing it properly, I think that's a reflection of how I treated him on that specific area, right? And again, in younger ages, it's easier for people to adopt and to learn. And I feel, to answer to your question, is it might be a combination of the few things. For sure, culture is one of it, right? For sure is, the society of the people when you're around it, we all coming from a different backgrounds, right? And there are some right or wrongs based on, again, subjective measures in each country or each culture that I not necessarily right now approve them for my son, is because I feel there is no framework in those areas. Those areas are people has to decide on what is right or wrong. There are some main frameworks, but if you go to if you want to personalize those things, that goes back to the people. We have to respect them. Doesn't matter if it's 5 years old or 10 years old or 3 years old or 40 years old. We have to respect people for who they are. We can't expect them to think the way that we do. So to answer to your question, I think you're right. It's a combination of bunch of things. Is again, when we're younger, in our generation has been many things that our parents, for good reasons, they were trying to say, hey, this is right or this is wrong, and that has been in our head. That is going up, or being with our friends or school or teachers, and teachers coming from the whole education. Kind of like a structure of that country that is coming, and the combination of the few things is going to be the outcome of who we are today and what we do. So I think I agree with you that those are some of the right now we see the outcome of the many years of ups, downs, learning, pushing back, and going through that environment. Is it right? I don't think so. Not everything is right. It's just you have to be open to make some of these changes slowly to get you where you are today.
Yeah. And I also think from my experience, I learned that the more you open up and maybe talk about your fears and challenges, that actually, before I thought it will be seen as a weakness of yours, but it seems to me that it can be seen as a strength of yours. And the more you can talk about it, it actually shows that even that vulnerability, being able to discuss those topics is actually a good thing, and people accept it and see you from a different angle. So I actually think it could be a benefit to open up and talk a little bit more about those challenges. And that's why I'm doing the podcast too, just kind of share the experiences of different people who they go through. Because many people go through adversities, but they tend not to talk about them. They only see the shiny picture. You're, 40 under 40. Everything was given to you. Everything is great. But how much work those people put into the process, right? Like, I think very often we don't talk about those things and all the challenges that they go through. So sometimes it's good to share. It's good to be a bit more vulnerable. I'm not saying like being vulnerable all the time, but just to share challenges, talk about fears sometimes. And obviously you need to talk to the right people too, who can understand it, relate to it, but it's important. Okay. So one more thing I want to ask you is how to learn how to think big, because that's a conversation I had with a few people in the past. When people were arguing with me, you're either born with it and that's it, you can't change it. And some people say, no, you can learn it, but you don't know how. So can you share your perspective? First of all, do you think you have that in you already as a person, or you can learn to think big? Because some people say, oh no, it's just like you're just born with it. You can't change things around. I don't believe it, but I met people who truly think that way, and I don't know why. So what do you think about it?
I think, again, that topic is very subjective, right? Maybe even the way that I think is not something that may work for you or one of your people that listen to this podcast, right? I think the very first thing is every person should learn more about himself or herself on number one, how you can be happy. That's the biggest thing in life. Two, what is your big mission in life? Because I may say, hey, my big goal, we're talking about big goal, right? Let's say, hey, the big picture for me is I want to have, one person may come and say, hey, my big picture is I want to have my own business that I produce X, amount of dollars per year. The other person is going to look at it like, so what, right? The other person may come and say, hey, my biggest goal is I want to have a family with healthy kids, and I want to do that. The other person look at it and is like, so what? Right? So we can't judge each other based on the goal. I think everyone should have their own big goal, but our big goal may have a different definition at the end. That's the purpose of life that we're doing that, right? And again, we had this conversation as well, about like multiple different ventures that you're working on. And as I always say, like, hey, always look at the big picture at the end and go backwards to get to what it is today. But that big picture, no one can question being big or small except you, because you know yourself, you know what you've gone through, you know what makes you happy in life, right? That can be, hey, I want to have like, it can be something with philanthropy things. It can be, hey, it's going to be business goals. It can be personal goals. It can be even like the very personal, like, hey, my big goal is like, again, I talk to multiple people depending on the stages. And like, hey, my big goal for next 3 years is I want to go through a rehab on different things, which I give a lot of credit because that's way bigger for them than doing something else. Now, we all can use the cliche stuff and say, hey, I want to have an exit. I want to have this. I want to have that. But that doesn't mean those are big. The big is what makes a big impact in your happiness. Whatever that is, it's big, right? So to answer to your question, I think that, big picture or big goal, it's very personal. And, everyone should have one and go for it. Now, you want to change it, that's okay. But don't, change it too much too often, because then it's going to lose that, being that North Star for you that you always can look at it and move forward. And I don't think anyone should set their own big goals based on other people's and say, hey, I'm excited for that person because that person just had a exit of X million dollars. I want to be that. No. Or I want to have this person, that person wants to have a family, or that person wants to take care of their parents, or this person wants to travel. This doesn't matter what it is. Have a better understanding of what makes you happy and set your big goal around that. So my thought process on that is every person, should have their own big goal, but based on their own, mentality and life experiences. And yeah, it can be changed, but it's better to stick with it for a while and try to modify things or think about it first before you changing it too often. But change is part of life, and nothing is not changeable in life, I feel.
Yeah, no, I love it. Love it. And it also reminds me how sometimes I think that people do not take time to really ask themselves what's important for them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think they're chasing that dream of somebody else. And I guess we all go through it at some point in life. It's just important to kind of get it from that part quicker and come back to what you want. Because we all tend to have that, oh my God, that so-and-so is so amazing. I want to be like him or her. But I think eventually not many people take time to think, what do you want to be yourself? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So let's talk about business now. I think that's something I've been holding on for quite some time. Like, I would love to hear a few things from you in terms of, obviously, because your main role in the company you're in right now is strategy and marketing. And both things are extremely important and extremely fast changing nowadays. So I want to talk a little bit more about how you got into the strategy world in a way, because I know some people find word strategy is a little bit vague in a way. So I want to kind of maybe give a little bit of clarity. And what does it mean to be a strategy officer, as chief of strategy in a company? What type of role you have, and what type of vision you have for yourself, a company, and how to even build a successful strategy for the project. So if you don't mind telling me a little bit more about that, because I am personally interested as well, because strategy is key for any business. But to become an expert on strategies, how do you do that? What's your goal? What's your vision for the company in general? I'm talking about general, how to build strategy, right strategy for the business.
For sure. I appreciate it. So my background has always been kind of like sales, marketing, growth, and mostly around tech in one way or the other. Mm-hmm. Now, right now, at Victory Square, I work with multiple different portfolio companies around their sales, growth strategies, M&A, and scaling the operation. Now, I've been spending more time in last year and a half on one of our portfolio companies called Hydrate, beside other companies and helping on them on the growth side of it and scaling the business. So again, going back, I'll start with the individual factors in people. Sometimes there are things that we're really good at it, and there are things that we want to be good at it. And sometimes people follow the thing who they want to be rather than who they are. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But knowing the fact that you're not good at it, and you have to work on that, constantly to be good at it, not just getting into it because you think you're good at it. Matter of the fact, you will suck, and you're not going to be able to go up. Now, when you were talking about the growth and a strategy, I feel you can't do the same thing for every business. Every business is as unique as itself. There are many factors to look at, the strategy or the growth side of it, from the team, from the offerings that can be service or product, from the persona of the clients at the end, from the weakness and the strength of the company and positioning of the company when you're looking at, in compared to other competitors that you have in the landscape of the same service that you're offering. Then you can figure out the areas that you're good at it and you're not good at it, and how you want to approach that. I think that requires its own talk to talk about strategy and what it is. But the biggest thing sometimes, a lot of, there are so many entrepreneurs or even the companies or senior management teams that they have blind spots and they don't even see that. And they always want to go at something bigger when, a gold mine is next to them, right? What I always say and what I always think, if a business is doing okay in a way that is producing revenue in a good amount of time, they have customers that are using it, they are doing something right? Let's not focus on what they're not doing. Let's focus on what they're doing right and try to learn from that and replicate that, or just have a segue from that to make something bigger. At the end of the day, again, when you look at some of the businesses offering services, products, if the founder and the executive team are looking at the end consumer in a way that how they're gonna use this one or where they're gonna use this one, that's where you're just gonna see some spotlights that you can build on top of that. I talk to many founders that they're smart, but they're so emotionally attached to their ideas and their offerings, and they feel they know everything when they don't, because they're not the end users. The end users are the one who's going to dictate to you what you are doing and what you need to do. That will reflect in your marketing, in your strategy, in your sales approaches, in your customer service. And again, just make it like a very simple example. Like, forget about a strategy. You're talking about a very junior salesperson that wants to sell your product. You see salespeople that they're selling the product on the areas that that person likes, not the consumer, right? Consumer, you may have one question on why are you on the phone with me, and they tell you what it is. And if you address that, the contract is signed. But they keep focusing on the areas that that consumer doesn't even know. And you're confusing that individual. So that's in the bigger scale is going to be on the strategy. The bigger scale is going to be on sales and marketing. The bigger scale will be on the company setting. And one more thing to that is, whatever the strategy of the company is, it's key that the entire team, from the most junior person to the most senior person, are aligned on that. And sometimes you get to the companies and you ask this question, like, what are the 3 goals for the company? And you get different answers from different people in different departments. And, and the first thing that I usually ask is, how do you expect these people to work toward the same goal? If you're sitting, on a boat and everyone trying to push you to move forward, if they paddle in different times, you're going to start, spinning around. You're not going to moving forward. And then it's not their fault. They're putting their time, they're putting their effort, they're putting their heart, but they don't know what they're putting their effort for is not what the vision of the company is. So again, that's a longer conversation, but in a high level, making sure everyone is aligned and focusing on the areas that you're good at it and there are appetite in the market with the approaches that the end consumers are expecting to get rather than on what you think what they need will be very helpful in a lot of businesses to grow.
Okay. Well, here I have two questions for you. The first one, how would you make sure that everyone on the team knows about the strategy and knows about that direction? So how do you achieve that? Let's say you have a company of, 50 people. So what is it that you as a leader need to do? You need to sit down with everyone, or how do you bring that message across the whole team? What would be your suggestion?
So there are two parts to that. One is understanding the state that every person in that organization is at a time. So, there's nothing nothing wrong, or it's not hard to send, a 3 to 5 well thought questions to, first of all, see the existing, states of the business, right? Like what are the top 3 goals for the company? What are the top 3 goals for your department that is helping with the company that you think? Talk about weaknesses and strength, 3 to 5 questions. Don't make it too complicated. That is going to give you a great landscape of who you're dealing with, right? And then the second biggest part is you as a CEO, as a main strategy person, as the head of the department, sit down with the rest of the head of the departments and come up with maximum 3 main goals for your company by end of the year. If there's more than that, you won't achieve it. You have to make sure there are 3 clear goals that everyone can get to it. Then it's going to be communications, and break it down for every department that how they can help to those main company goals. And then it's going to be every individual goals and how it's going to help with the department. There's a new system that came out called OKR. It's not too new right now, but there's some of the companies they're implementing that, which is objective key results. And that really helped for that transparency across the board, that every individual can see the impact of what they do in the team level, in department level, and in the company level. Then everyone is aligned. And again, when you grow your team, it will be super hard to make sure everyone is efficient. And the only way that you can do that is by making it very clear for those individuals how they are impacting the final goal for the company and what are those goals. Because don't discount the people that you have. Sometimes it's the miscommunications and mistraining from the higher up, and you're questioning why this department is not producing. But they are producing, but they're not producing what you want because the communication wasn't clear, because the goal is not clear. And giving that chance to everyone and empower them on the areas that they need help, I think you can get the most out of most people without even just making any hard decisions.
Yeah, and I think it will be easier for those individuals also to feel more appreciated and fulfilled in their roles too. Because I think that's another thing I hear again from people that I know. Sometimes because of that miscommunication, they think that they do their best, or they don't even want to do their best anymore because they don't know why they're doing certain things. So I think what you said just totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I have the second question based on your previous answer. You know how right now it's super popular in mainstream when people say, well, when you run your own business, you have to push. You will always have problems. You will always have issues. You always have obstacles, but you need to push through, don't give up, continue with your idea. However, I also, and based on what you said, like you need to have a right strategy, and sometimes strategy might not work. So where is that turning point where maybe the leader of the company should sit down and say, you know what, maybe the strategy is no longer a good strategy. How about I'll just switch? Because you know how you can't just push for, and you said sometimes people they think they know their product, they're right, but things are not working still. So where is that turning point? What are maybe some of the points or parameters that you look at in your company where you say, you know what, maybe there should be a tweak in the strategy. Maybe we should change it a little bit. How do you feel that? How do you see that?
So anything that you do in business, I feel it has to be tied to specific KPI and touch points in a way that, we'll figure out that are we on track or we're not on track. Now, when you define strategies is not only goals, it's not only where you want to be. Strategy is also how you want to get there and how you can measure that in different milestones. To first, are you on track? 2, do you pivot? Do you need to pivot? 3, do you need to make adjustments? Right? So to answer to your question, we can look at that as a black box. We can look at that in a way that, hey, we had this strategy. We're going to be working around that for 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, and then look in 12 months, holy, we should have changed this 3 months ago. Because there are some external factors when you also do your strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Just think about all the companies that they had amazing strategies and all the right strategies before COVID, and then COVID happened, right? It was out of everyone's hand. It wasn't something that the companies could forecast ahead of the time when, something as impactful from the economy perspective and the market perspective, happened. So if you have all the measurements in place, then it's going to make it easy for everyone to measure and see, hey, are we on the right track? Are we on the right strategy? Do we need to delay that? Do we need to make any adjustments? And go from there.
Mm-hmm. So you'd say just to have that timeline set up regardless. Let's see for 6 months, this strategy in 6 months, where we'll sit down and revisit about something like that, right? You have that specific timeline where you would...
Sorry, it has to be tied to a timeline and KPIs. Now, I'm not saying 3 or 6 or a week or 2, but if the goal is a year or 2 years, break it down in quarterly, break it down in monthly, break it down on weekly, not only for one department, but for all departments, and measure all that and see if you're moving forward on the right pace or not.
Yeah. Okay. So one more question about strategy, I guess, the M&A, because you've done that quite a few times. And I am curious to know, from your perspective, how do you know that the company, let's say you build a business, you're building a business, it's generating some revenue, or maybe you have some investment coming in. How do you know that the company is ready for M&A, and how do you choose the prospective companies to acquire and bring to the company? Because I think that's another thing.
That's also very subjective. Again, it goes back to, I always start with the team, right? You have to see what is the big goal for the founders, for the team, the original team. Where do you want to go with that, right? And then go backward, right? When you say a company is ready for M&A or not, it's very subjective. You never know if you're ready or not, but it all depends on the founders and the investors, and see what their main goals are when they got into that business, right? And again, that will dictate when you're ready for it. Some people, their vision is, hey, I want to have X amount, X amount of dollars for exit. They want to have, I want to be part of the bigger company and go through that. Everyone can be measured with their own scale when you're starting that business. And that's good to have that end goal and then go backward to see when you're ready for it, right? For M&A. Now, the companies who does M&A, they do it for different reasons. And you might be, somebody's interested in your company because they love the product that you have, and doesn't matter what your revenue is or how many client base you have. They feel if they want to spend time and money and energy to reproduce your product or your services, it's going to take time, and they need to have it right away. So they're going to pay for that and the lost opportunity cost that they may have in case if they don't have the product today. There are other companies, when they look at the M&A, they look at the balance sheet and they just want to buy revenues in specific industries. There are some other ones that they want to have your customer base, right? Because they feel the existing products and services going to be a great, they're going to be able to sell to your customers. So again, that's a very kind of big topic to talk about, but being ready or not, I think goes back to the main goal of the founders, the original team, and the investors, and figure out if is it the time to move forward or not. And again, M&A can happen for different reasons and different stages, and it's not one way or the other.
Yeah, and also sometimes it can be not as successful as planned.
Yeah.
It's from the experiences I've had and what I've seen sometimes. Actually, that's an interesting thing. But I think those ones that were not as successful, the challenges came from not being able to communicate the end goal to the new team that joining the team of the original company. So it was not about the product, not about customers. Everything looked great on paper, but the problem actually came from that miscommunication and losing people, valuable people from the company that joined the original one. So have you been through situations like that? Have you seen it as well?
Sorry, in that one side is ready and the other side is not?
Well, it's just like when the company that was acquiring another company was not able to communicate the goal and the strategy, the main strategy to the company joining, and losing people from the company coming in, and the whole M&A was not as successful, didn't bring what they were expecting.
So here's the thing, like you see that a lot, especially in the small market cap, that, you know, there are smaller companies that they go through that, right? I feel the biggest thing that, you know, in life can help and improve things is communications, right? Again, we're chatting about this on the strategy side. Same thing for M&A, right? You see a lot of, again, I can't say a lot, but you see M&As that have been unsuccessful simply because, again, there hasn't been a proper communication either from the company who's acquiring and the company being acquired, or even just throughout their teams to figure out what needs to be done, right? So I feel like, again, acquisition is a big milestone that sometimes is even harder than starting a business, because two different companies with two different culture sets, with two different approaches, with two different a group of people that been used to working on a specific pace or within a specific culture, now they're trying to merge, you know, and provide something together, either, you know, to the same group or, you know, share some products. And, you know, a lot of times you see after M&A, there are some structural changes happening in some of these companies just to make everyone align. And, you know, that also may include some hard decisions to be made throughout the team on either side.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess it boils down to communication, as you said. Even though we talk about communication everywhere, people talk about communication, improving communication, and yet we're still struggling with it. It seems to me. We still, for some reason, even though there's so much resources, like we can find any type of information, any book you want to read about communication, but yet we're still struggling with this. And it's interesting how people's factor is still is a big deal in those things. It's amazing. Okay, well, I have a couple more business related questions for you prepared, and one of them is actually related to marketing and marketing trends. I wanted to ask you, what do you see, what kind of changes and trends you see in approach to marketing of healthcare, telehealth products? Because that's one of the areas you were specializing in. And as we said, it's a very fast changing industry in general, telehealth, digital health. And of course, marketing for this area would also change rapidly. So what are the key trends that you see? Are there social media trends maybe, or anything that you're observing? That'd be interesting for me to know.
So again, that varies from industry to industry. And as I said, like you have to look at the persona of your existing users and customers and try to learn from that to replicate, to see what are the similar people out there that they're not using it and how you can get into them. But in general, when you're talking about healthcare, I feel, the whole digital health and healthcare, they've been one of the industries that they were impacted positively through COVID, in a way that healthcare has always been behind when it gets to technology and offering to consumers. Now, the whole COVID situation really woke up the entire industry, and we see, again, a lot of ideas, good or bad, coming and going, but at least we see some changes, and that's the biggest thing. Now, when you're talking about marketing, I feel it's not only for healthcare in general right now. We're in the era that we're talking about educating. And, your end users, we passed the era of, hey, the price is $5.99 if you, end up signing up by tomorrow is $2.99, or we're going to give you a free copy or this or that. Don't get me wrong, those may work. But if you want to look at the big picture, is how you can educate your potential clients to learn about the why of your product, not the what. The how and the what is your product, but the why is the most important thing. Now, you have to figure out how you can reach your potential clients to educate them. Might be social media. It might be, hey, it's going to be through podcasts, or it can be through, hey, conferences, right? Right now, with the whole power of the social media and Web3, that we're decentralizing the focus and the control of so many different things. We go back, we're giving the power to the communities. And powering to the communities means, hey, they need to understand on why to use your product or your service, no matter what it is. Create your marketing funnel and try to educate them through the funnel to have a conversion rate from one layer to the other layer, and making sure that they follow you through that. And those education pieces has to be, the top notch, not in a way, again, you try to have a sales pitch, but actually you're talking about the why, and figure out and learn better about your potential clients and their personas. So you start targeting them correctly with the proper content, right? And everything else that you're talking about, hey, social media or email, those are different mediums that you're going to have that education passing to your potential clients to do that. The better, education that you have in different, there are many different ways to do that, but the better educations that you have, the easier sell you're going to have, because they understand your product. They want to become a user. And you also have a better churn, because now, again, you have people that they've learned about the why, and they came on board with you to just have a how to get to those whys.
Mm-hmm. But I had a feeling, or just me, maybe, again, just the way how I felt, people got tired of all those newsletters and emails coming through you. So I thought they don't really read them anymore, even though you can have the most amazing educational material included. But I think we have such large amount of them going to our email boxes, like it's hard to sort through. So do you think it's still effective, or nowadays we need to focus on some more of a shorter, quicker point of information type of media pieces? I don't know, videos maybe. So what do you think? What do you think works nowadays better?
Absolutely. So that's going to go to the marketing tactics that you want to do. Obviously, the older we become, or the younger generation is going through it, the patience span is going to be shorter and shorter for people, right? And obviously, getting their attention is the very first thing that you need to know. It used to be, hey, if you had a really good email subject, you could have had, the opening rate. Now that goes across the board. It might be, hey, a very simple, funny TikTok video that is like 20 seconds and is leading to a proper content. Or it can be, hey, maybe, a highlight of the podcast in 5 seconds or 10 seconds with 3 or 5 points. You may have a great content, but if you don't have a proper teaser, for lack of a better word, to get the attention of the people, nobody's going to read that, right? So that goes back to creating your funnel and how you're going to create that marketing funnel that slowly goes down, and how you can get the attention of your potential clients and potential leads to go through your content. Definitely having long pages won't work as much. Again, that varies from industry to industry. But the best way is to learning about your audience, figuring it out, the content that you want to produce, cut it in a smaller version that they can follow the story, not just jumping from one to the other. Then it's going to slowly get them to the point that they want to associate with you. They want to work with you. And again, that goes back to the sales approaches as well, that the sales is not about like, hey, it used to be on, hey, I want to talk about like, if you go back, maybe like 30 years ago, it was about features, right? Hey, my car has air conditioning, this. Whoever has more features, they would have signed up. Then they came to the era that people say, hey, it's about benefits and the pains, and hey, figure out what are the pains and talk about the benefits. And still there are a lot of companies stuck in that. Now it's not even about that. Right now it's about the feelings and the emotion and the brand that you have and how you're going to empower them. Then you're going to talk about the benefits. Then you're going to talk about the features. So it's you have to go through these things. Now, marketing and sales, I feel they're the same department right now. Yeah. So one has to be complementary to the other. The better marketing you do, the shorter sales cycle you have. And that's going to be the end-to-end process that is going to help you to sell your products.
I 100% agree. Could not agree more than that. But the only thing here is, let's say if we talk about healthcare product or any type of, let's say telehealth. When you mentioned, let's say if you have a brand of clothing and a 5-second TikTok video will make sense, because obviously all you need is just a showcase, someone needs to like it, and then you have the information about the brand, etc. It's much easier to accomplish versus when it's something like health in general, which is much more complicated subject on its own, when people have to take time and educate themselves, and you need to provide them, like you said, more education. I think this is where the challenge is, because you still need to build the brand, you still need to fit proper amount of information in a very short format to grab the attention and then to hopefully encourage those people to go and read about the program or the platform or any type of product that you were selling in the healthcare space. So I think this is where the challenge of this industry is. And I wonder how to overcome that challenge, because it's a complex subject. Health is not a brand of car, or that's what I usually tell people from my work, right? Like it's not simple, but how do you adjust such a complex matter in this new world of quick information, 5-second videos, 5-second little teasers, etc. So how do you see that? How do you envision that?
So you're not wrong. There are two parts to that. One, you said it well. It starts with the brand, right? Mm-hmm. Brand is not the color code or the logo anymore. Brand is the feeling associated to what you're offering to your users, right? I'll give you a few examples. Apple bring a new iPhone, and everyone knows that there's not much of a difference between the old iPhone and the new iPhone. And everyone knows it's overpriced, right? And sometimes when it's buggy. Yet there is a lineup that people, that they have no money and they want to buy that iPhone because they're emotionally attached to that. They want to be part of that. Now, ask 10 different people to define their iPhone. What does iPhone means to them? Some say it's a camera. Some say it's an email application. Some say it's a good phone. So Apple done a great job in finding the persona of each person, how they use that final product and create that brand that they attach to it. Now you see some of the ads that is only focusing on camera, right? You may see it, you may not see it. Depends if you're a camera person or not. You see other ads that they may be based on your personalities. Now, it's not only Apple. There are some other companies doing a really good job with that. You're talking about McDonald's, right? You say Happy Meals. What is in the Happy Meal? Nobody knows. But it's attached to kids. You want to be part of it, right? You talk about Starbucks. You barely see Starbucks advertise for a coffee. They're trying to connect, having that feeling for connecting people together, right? Because they found what their end users want and how they look at their products. They created that brand. So you're absolutely right. It starts with the brand. So when you're talking about medical, you're absolutely right. It's about that product or that brand. What does it mean to their end users? So depending who you're targeting, are you targeting the healthcare professional? Because if that's the key, you may even need to help them one level further with the brand, how they're going to translate that to their patients, right? Now, if you want to go directly to the D2C and just figuring it out, to the consumers, then you need to break it down on the whys, and that's become your brand. Then the brand start going down and slowly becoming like how you can sell that. So you're absolutely right. But that education is not only toward the customers, it also is going to be around your brand, on how do you define your brand? Because again, I think that's the biggest hurdle for a lot of businesses that used to do business differently, that they feel the brand is the logo or the color code or the font, which they are participating in that end results, but it's not it. Like when you look at it, Coke been spending millions and millions of dollars every year to tie their brand with the happiness, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the first thing comes. Or when you're talking about a specific brand, the color code automatically comes to your head, and you're talking about the experiences that you had with that specific brand, and you try to build on top of that, and they try to build on top of that and connect with you in the same way that you see their brand. You may look at one brand differently than I do, right? It's just the difference of how we use that brand and how that brand comes in our life for a joy or for a use or whatever that will be.
Yeah. Well, I guess it comes based on what you said, it boils down to micro-targeting, finding those smaller groups of people so you can actually target them separately based on their interests. but also the branding. Actually, the branding is an interesting part for me too, because I think it's easy to talk about big brands, developed brands like Apple and Starbucks and Coca-Cola, but what about smaller companies? If they're just starting, again, coming from my experience of people I spoke with, sometimes people suffer from that imposter syndrome. Like, how can I sell my product for this much and so high if, I don't know if it actually gives that value to people? And you said it's subjective, but how to believe it yourself first, and then you can sell that idea? Like, what will be your suggestion to people or companies that are kind of going through that stage of, okay, we need to establish that brand, we need to find that niche, and if we want to play in a higher tier, how to get into that tier right away, not to undersell and stick to that plan, strategy, going back to strategy.
That goes back again to when you're talking about your company, figure out who your audience is, right? Learning about your audience first. And then if you already have existing client base, go and ask questions to figure out how they see you, how they define you, what are the top things that they love about you and about your product or services. Then you can translate that to the future customers, right? Now, again, you may sell sunglasses, right? But you can't keep talking about what you think is that sunglasses is to your end users. But if you have a survey to your existing clients and ask 3 to 5 questions and figure out how they define you, how they use your product, why they like your product, that your brand is. And then you can easily go and, work on the similar audience with the similar approaches. And that's how your brand become, right? People try to make it super complicated. They always want to say, okay, they ignore my existing clients and I want to go after other people. But they already people who's paying for your service or products. So why not figuring it out on what are the areas that they like and try to, tweak that and go after the similar people who's not using your product.
That's awesome. Thank you. Oh my God, the time is flying by, as always, when I talk to you. Well, I guess we probably should wrap up a little bit, because I think I can talk forever. I have so many more questions for you. I can talk forever with you about business and ideas, and it's awesome. Maybe we should do it again, actually, if you don't mind. It would be awesome to have you back on the podcast. But before I finish, well, thank you. I really appreciate your support, though. But before I finish, I want to ask you a fun question. And again, because I started my podcast with a theme of travel, because that's how I meet people, and I love that part of my life so much. I'm passionate about it. I want to ask you as well, if you would have a chance to travel somewhere next, where would that be and why? Could you tell me?
I mean, being in Vancouver, if you ask me in November, December, what will be the next, where you're going to go, definitely is going to be somewhere warm that I want to go, and I want to spend, time on the beach. But I'm a sports freak. I love sports. And if you ask me at any given time, where would you go? It's always somewhere that I can watch a game live. That's what I love the most. Obviously, if you ask me right now, even though I'm not, but I would have loved to, go to Qatar and watch the World Cup that is starting in a week live. That probably would have been my answer. But I think realistically will be somewhere warm in next few months that I can get away. So
Qatar is not an option for you?
All this rain and just be somewhere warm.
Yeah, I know. That's life in Canada, actually, for all of us. So winter is escape time for all of us. But Qatar is not an option for you?
No, I mean, there's so many things that are happening right now that, probably I'm just going to watch the games on TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to say thanks again, because it was a pleasure as always. Thanks for taking time and being on podcast. And I want to remind everyone that the podcast will be launched on video platforms and also just on regular podcast platforms. And I just hope that, more and more people will start following and listening and learn from stories that my guests are bringing in. And thanks for being one of them. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you having me. It's always great talking with you. And I hope your audience found the conversation interesting as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Very inspirational. Thanks a lot.